Welcome to year 2 of A Mick, a Mook, and a Mike.
Hosted by 4-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Pace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor. Brought to you by We Can Coffee Company, manufacturer of freshly roasted premium coffee blends delivered directly to your door.
This week's guest, songwriter and composer, member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, Steve Dorff.
My brother
Frank. How are you, pal? How's everything going?
How they hanging?
A little to the left. It's a part 3, so I don't notice it that much. A little to the left.
So, what were you for Halloween? What were you for Halloween, and what were you in the bedroom for Halloween?
Well, Frank, as you know, I like the nylons and the garter belt. I like to express myself. No, I don't go for that stuff. I think that's, it's for kids. It's a great thing for kids. I'm not big on the Halloween thing. Are you?
Yeah, but your
granddaughter now, so you got that.
But she's 12. But your daughter is 15. So did she dress up and go out?
My daughter's not 15.
Well, your stepdaughter.
Yes, that's right. My stepdaughter's 15. Thank you. And no, she will. Yeah, she's big on that stuff. And my wife.
My
wife loves all that stuff. Take my wife, please. No, my wife loves all that stuff. I'm not big on that. My father was a cynic. I mean, a real cynic. And being from Ireland, everything was like, he loved America, but everything was, that's American. He didn't like American sports. He didn't like American holidays. He didn't like American this. That's all that nonsense.
He liked American money, though.
He liked American money. He never held on to it, Lord, but he liked it. But I think like to me, and this is a terrible thing to say, I guess, but Father's Day. That's a man.
Fathers? How do you spell that?
Father. The stuff they give to the horses. The father. They feed the father to the horses. That's a manufactured day for the Hallmark people. I mean, come on, Father's Day.
Well, what about, we recently went through a scourge of early in October, Son's Day. Yeah. Daughter's Day.
Come on.
What kind of bullshit is that?
But we're perfectly willing to swallow Father's Day, Groundhog's Day. I mean, come on. I mean, how many holidays do you need? I think it's all about Hallmark, selling cards. Mother's Day, look, I'm all for Mother's Day because
every day's Mother's Day.
It should be. But give them one day that we have the reverence, because they're our mothers.
Every day should be Mother's Day. Women should be running the country. I'm serious. Yeah. Men have had their chance for 250 years, and they did nothing but screw it up. Women could try it.
Well,
out.
You know what's interesting, and this is dead serious.
By the way, our guest Stephen Dorff, Hall of Fame songwriter, will be joining us in about 5 minutes. So
great, and we'll have some more to say about him.
Yep.
But what's interesting is, and I noticed this when I went back to school, that my girlfriend was in a doctorate program, and women, 85 to 90% of doctorate students are women. Because men go out and go to work.
And also women are smarter.
And they're willing to stay in school. And I even just read an article about that in this country, how women are staying in school and men are out trying to earn a buck.
You sound like Don Rickles. And then he hits the highest.
But so maybe, well, like you said, they couldn't do worse. And look, women have run other countries and been fairly successful at it.
You think?
Indira Gandhi, not bad. Certainly Chancellor of Germany, Merkel just stepped down.
Yep.
She did a hell of a job. I'm for giving them a shot.
A lot of them. I wish a woman would show her head here that could be a good candidate for the Democratic nomination.
You know what? One of the things, though, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you will, but it seems to me that every time you got a strong woman, a woman who's independent, a woman who's successful, right away, she's a bitch. She's a bitch. Whereas if a man, well, he's just a tough businessman, But
my wife, Karen, says that women are harder on women than they are on men.
I would agree with it 200%. I think that's, Hillary got banged by women, right? She didn't carry the woman's vote.
She got banged by women and men.
Well, that was a metaphor, Frank. But I mean, she didn't carry the woman. I don't think she carried the woman's vote, did she?
I think she did.
Did she?
Yeah.
She didn't carry it by much.
No, she didn't. Because I can't believe that two more odious people could be candidate for president than Hillary #2 and Donald Trump #1.
Where do we get them from? I mean, that's another thing. I mean, it's like
We
these are the
make them.
best.
We make them, and the only
This
reason
is the best we could do.
well, the only reason Trump won is because he was not one of them.
Yeah.
He was not one of them,
Yes, that's true.
and we found out how much he should have been one of them, and he really was one of them more than.
Well, that's another thing that's bothered me. I see a lot more of these celebrities running, and all I can do as good a job as they can as a politician. And I'm not a fan of politicians by any stretch of the imagination. But, you know, these movie stars, just because they got a face or a name, I should be governor, I should be this. Maybe you should know the laws.
But that goes back to George Murphy in California.
Yeah, sure. Before Reagan.
Before
George Murphy,
Reagan.
sure. He was awful, the dancer.
But Caitlyn Jenner gives me hope.
Well,
Because she got less than 1% of the vote in California with all of her celebrity.
now, was she carry the men's vote or the woman's vote, or she carry both of them, or she both of them?
She didn't carry either of them.
Yeah.
She got almost 0% of the
So
vote.
when you check her box, it's neuter?
Don't go there. Don't
I'm
go
just
there.
curious.
Cut.
You check the box of not interested.
Not interested. That's definite. Not interested. And how many times have you heard somebody say, "I voted for the lesser of two evils"?
Well, yes, but in Texas, I'm all for Matthew McConaughey running for governor because he could win it. He could win the governor of Texas. If he wants to run, I think he can win the governor of Texas and get that asshole out of office.
Yeah, that guy's got to go. What do you say about the governor of Alabama? He took the COVID money to use it to build prisons.
Well, Herschel Walker's running for Senate in Georgia.
In Georgia. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Celebrities. It's celebrities. And the thing that gets me, well, again, I had an argument with a buddy of mine who's a conservative, right-wing guy, one of my dearest friends ever. We don't usually talk politics. But the other day he was talking about, I always had a dream one day you're going to become conservative. I said, sure, I am a conservative. Where are the conservatives? There's no conservative. Nation building is not conservative. Going trillions of dollars in debt is not conservative. There's nothing conservative about it.
and, Gil and I go around and around.
Right,
on this.
and you're friends in both opposite sides of
and-
politics.
The thing we disagree on is that I'm not arched to the left, and he's not. Well, he may be more arched to the right than ever, but I'm firmly that 80% in the middle. I mean, I want a strong military. I want freedom of a woman to make her own choice. I want a lot of middle ground. I'm for.
Well, it seems to me a majority of the country, a lot of things the majority of the country for. Term limits.
Yep.
I say 80% of the country's for term limits.
I'm a big believer in that.
You're not going to get it.
I'm tired of seeing Dianne Feinstein and what's his name in Texas,
Yeah.
88 years old.
Yeah, I mean, running again. So, I mean, yeah, I mean.
And quite honestly,
But if the 80% of the public wants it, we don't get it. Who the hell are they working for?
yeah. Well, as much as I admire Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I blame her for a lot of the problems in the country today because she should have retired and let Obama pick his own successor to the Supreme Court instead of hanging on and hanging on and hanging on and giving the Mitch McConnell the
right
chance.
to pick three Supreme Court justices.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and again,
I know you can't say anything bad about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but I'm going to say she's part of the problem we're having in the country today with the Supreme Court. And we'll have in the country for the next 15 years.
I'm going to take up the Merrick Garland incident for a second. Do you think if McConnell would have let Obama appoint Merrick Garland, that the Republicans would have passed him, that he would have got past the Senate? I don't think so. I don't think they would have let him go.
I don't know, but if Ruth Bader Ginsburg had retired 2 years into Obama's second term, they wouldn't have had any choice.
Yeah, but
they would have approved somebody that Obama had.
Yeah, but the idea of like less than a year left, and consequently we should let the people decide. Well, that went out the window.
That'll be out there. Well, I had enough of this.
Enough politics for sure.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Stephen? Why don't you read something on the back of Stephen Dorff's book?
Well, let me tell the public who we're talking about here, our viewers, who Steve Dorff is, another one of your friends, and a terrific, I think he's going to be a terrific guest. He wrote a book called I Wrote That One Too, From Willie to Whitney. And obviously, Willie and Whitney don't need any last names. We know who they are. But the amount of people that he's written hit songs for is just astounding. And, well, on the back of his book, one of the endorsements, besides Kenny Rogers, is Clint Eastwood. And here's what Clint Eastwood said about our upcoming guest, Steve Dorff. He said, I met Steve Dorff when he was working with Snuff Garrett on Every Which Way But Loose. He was wildly talented and versed in every genre imaginable. Naturally, I wanted to work with him again, and we did. On Any Which Way You Can, Bronco Billy, Pink Cadillac, and Honky Tonk Man. Steve wrote some very clever original songs for those films and is a true master of his craft. And that's coming from Clint Eastwood. Pretty high praise.
A true master of his class, indeed.
Yes.
Clint. I'll read one more by fellow composer Paul Williams. He said, heart, humor, and above all, authenticity are part of the audible art created by Steve Dorff. His iconic songs are born in the center of his chest, where clever never gets in the way of touching or honest. From Kenny Rogers through the years to Eddie Rabbitt's Every Which Way But Loose, Steve's Grammy and Emmy award-winning work is an American treasure. I'm proud to call him friend, as am I. Welcome, Steve Dorff.
Wow.
Hey, Frank.
How are you, Steve? My name is Billy O'Connor. Nice to know you. A real pleasure. After doing research for you, incredible magnitude of your work. Unbelievable.
Oh, thank you. And you sound like a fellow New Yorker.
Yeah, but I'm going to keep my shoes on so I'll confuse you a bit. You won't know for sure.
And that's Derek Harris.
Hello.
Hey, Derek.
Hey, Steve.
No, that's quite a set you've got there. Where is that?
Well,
It's in the studio, Steve.
it's in the studio in my basement.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Is that Steve Dorff behind you on the wall?
Yeah, that's a poster from one of the concerts I've been doing around the country behind my book. And, yeah. So,
are they one-man shows, Steve? Is that...
Yeah, I sit at the piano and kind of tell the stories behind the songs, and try not to make too big a fool of myself singing them.
Well, your story starts in Queens, obviously. I mean, you grew up what part of Queens?
Forest Hills, Fresh Meadows.
Fresh Meadows, huh?
So Billy used to run a bar in Queens.
Oh yeah, I had a hot joint in Flushing for a long time on Northern Boulevard called Poets. Poets. It was an anagram for Piss on Everything Tomorrow's Saturday. Was a good joint. Had a good run there, though. But you left Queens at a pretty young age. I mean, first publishing. And how old were you when you got your first publishing deal?
I was 16.
That's
and I got paid. I think it was $35 a week to write songs, and then I went to college because my parents didn't want me being in the music business full time, and went to the University of Georgia. So I left New York, and about 5 years after graduating there, I came to Los Angeles, and that's really where the career kind of got started.
Well, I believe that, in our book, If These Lips Could Talk, I sort of profiled you in a chapter. I believe you were 16 and you wanted to be your parents wanted you to be a veterinarian?
Correct.
Do I have that right? So you went to University of Georgia to study veterinary school?
Pre-vet, and ran into Chemistry 101, and that was the end of my pre-veterinary medical career.
So Chemistry 101 ran into you, really?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, truth be told, I was always writing songs. I was writing music. I was sneaking away into the music school, and trying to cut classes and write songs and sneak into the music curriculum, and I always knew what I was going to do. So it was just a matter of being able to get in be at the right place at the right time, which is really the story of my career.
Well, so funny, of course, it's the story of my career also.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew what I was going to do. I just walked through any door that opened. I just took advantage of every door that opened, and it's funny, like you, that has happened to so many of us along the way. So you wrote your first hit song when you were at Georgia, right? That 5 years while you were in Georgia before you came to L.A., you were writing songs.
Well, I was writing songs. I didn't have a hit until my first chart record I had when I was at Georgia. It was by a guy named Dorsey Burnett, who was this country singer, and the song I think hit 40 in the Billboard charts. And so I thought that's it. I've made it. And then of course. Like everything else, like the first TV show or the first movie or the first #1, you can't get enough. Then it's like, okay, well, I got to follow that with something. I've got to have another #1. I've got to get another pilot to score. I've got to get another movie to write songs for. So that's just the way of this business.
And you ran into Snuff Garrett when you were at Georgia, correct?
I was visiting Los Angeles, trying to find my way out there. I had enough money to last me about 10 days, and I had pitched demos around to different producers. And Snuff Garrett was the one who actually called me and asked me to meet with him before I was leaving to go back to Atlanta. And we met, and he said, why don't I bring you out here and you'll work for me? And that was the beginning.
So you came out on a lark.
I did.
Well, he was a music producer, Snuff Garrett, right? And
yes, he was.
Was it a particular song that catapulted his interest in you, or just your?
Yeah, what happened was I came out here with enough songs and enough time to. I just blanketed all the producers that I'd read about: Jerry Fuller, Snuff Garrett, Jimmy Bowen, all the hot producers of that time. And this was in 1974. Snuff was the one who reacted to a demo that I had left, and he asked to meet with me, and I ran over and met with him, played him a couple of other songs on the piano, and he saw something in me that it made him want to bring me out to California. So I did. So he did.
So there's a story that's going around that you wrote the first song for Clint Eastwood in 24 hours. Why don't you tell us a little about that story?
Well, we actually wrote it in about 30 minutes. But we had 24 hours to do it. I got a call one night from Snuff, and he said, I'm music supervising this Clint Eastwood movie called Every Which Way But Loose, and he's desperate for a title song. The artist who had written the song for it, who was a prominent artist, he didn't like the song. And he was midway into post-production, which you know all about, Frank. And it was literally the 11th hour. And Snuff said, get me something by tomorrow. And I called Milton Brown, my friend in Mobile, Alabama, because I had no idea what Every Which Way But Loose meant. And he did. It was an old Southern phrase. And we wrote it over the phone. I was in L.A., he was in Alabama. And the next day I went in and played it for Snuff, and he loved it. And he called Clint. Clint asked us to come over to Warner Brothers, over to the studio. And we went over there, and I played it on the piano for Clint. And he loved it, and that was my lucky day. I should have gone to Vegas.
When you say we wrote it, so did Milton write the lyrics and you wrote the music?
Yes,
or-
yeah. Milton Brown wrote the lyric, and I did the music.
So how's that process work, Stephen?
Well, it's different with every collaborator. Every song is different. I've written it lyric first. I've written it music first. I've written them sitting in the room or on the phone with the other writer, where we just bounce ideas off each other, and somehow magically the song appears.
But you know when it's right.
Yeah, I think so.
And Eddie Rabbitt sang every which way but loose.
Yeah, we got Eddie Rabbitt to do it, who was the hot young guy at the time in Nashville, and there was already an album, a soundtrack deal in place with Electra Asylum, I believe, and Eddie was on that label, and Eddie did it, and it was just a huge hit, huge country and pop hit, and that was really when Clint heard the song and heard the finished record. He asked me if I'd ever scored a movie, and I almost said no, but in that 1/1,000,000th of a millisecond, I said, I've always wanted to. That's why I came to California, and he gave me my first shot at scoring a movie. So, I
guess my next question would be: if you had to tell a man you loved him, would it be Snuff Garrett or Clint Eastwood?
Well, at that particular moment, I loved them both. I ended up doing 5 movies with Clint. Snuff really, all things considered, Snuff put me on the playing field and gave me the opportunity to be in the game, and I'm deeply indebted to him for that.
And you did Barroom Buddies with Clint Eastwood, and Clint sang that song, didn't he?
Yeah, shortly after we had that big hit with Every Which Way But Loose, Clint called and said, "I want to sing." And, how do you answer that? So we decided a duet might be the best way to facilitate that, and we got a guy named Merle Haggard to come in, and
some guy.
we had a #1 record. Clint Eastwood having a #1 country record, so it was really fun.
That's amazing, isn't it? Well, you also wrote "Hoppy, Roy and Me," which was one of my favorite songs. That's probably
You're kidding.
one of.
You're kidding.
No, Roy Rogers sang it, and it was Roy was at the end of his career, and you laid down this track, and it was a delightful little record.
Yeah, Hoppy, Gene, and Me.
Hoppy, Gene, and Me, right.
And again, Snuff Garrett came up with that idea. One day he called Milton, and he said he worshipped the old Cowboys. He was just a huge fan of that whole era and grew up worshiping Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and all those great Westerns. And so one day, and he was good friends with Roy, and he called Milton and said, "I need a lyric for a song called Hoppy, Gene, and Me." So Milton wrote it, sent me the lyric, I wrote the music, and 2 weeks later we're in the studio with Roy and Rex Allen Sr. and
Wow.
doing this crazy record, and it was a top 10 record.
Yeah, it really was, and it was just it stays with me to this day. So when I saw your list of songs that you wrote, I said, "Well, he wrote that one too."
Yeah, well, the list is on and on and on. It's so prolific. The amount of people that you worked with, mind-boggling, and the magnitude of their presence is mind-boggling. Who'd you find the most? Who would you like to work with again? Out of all of those terrific singers, and I should, for our audience, just give a quick list of who we're talking about here. We're talking about Barbra Streisand, Celine Dion, Blake Shelton, Smokey Robinson, Kenny Rogers, Ringo Starr, Dusty Springfield, Cher, Ray Charles, Whitney, Dolly Parton. I mean, everybody. You worked with everybody. Is there an affinity? Is there an affinity for one of them that you say, "Geez, I'd love to work with that person again"? Or that doesn't even come across your mind?
It really doesn't. I keep looking back. Now that I'm getting a little older, and I go, it's crazy. I used to watch all these amazing singers and voices on TV, and just as a teenager, I'd watch Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck, and of course the Beatles and the Righteous Brothers on shows like Hullabaloo and Shindig, and think, oh, if I could only write songs for them, and I got to do it. And I have, it's crazy, but I think that's what I'm most proud of, is the versatility of the career I've had, being able to say when someone mentions, oh, I love Tom Jones, or I love Petula Clark, or I love Wynonna Judd. I wrote for all of them, and I got the opportunity to work with the greatest voices of this or any generation, really.
And what's really remarkable, and because of that, you were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2018. But we worked together on series, Murphy Brown. We worked together on movies, Babe Ruth, and you've written individual songs. You wrote for records. You're so versatile. And is there any difference between writing? Tell me, what's the difference between writing for a singer, writing for movies, or writing for TV?
Well, there's a big difference between writing songs, which are, basically 3.5, 4-minute little musical movies that have to be sung by artists to get on the radio. When you're doing television or film music, it's a much broader palette. You don't have to have lyrics, so you're not really constrained to any meter or any firm, time limits or time constraints. I really enjoy the freedom of writing, for film and TV, and underscoring what's going on in the picture.
You've also written a musical. You wrote Josephine. That has to be totally different entirely. I mean, and why Josephine Baker? Did you why choose that particular subject?
We were approached. John Bettis and I were approached to do that, and did a lot of homework on the history of Josephine and on her life, and it was just such an interesting time period. Nazi-occupied Paris, 1939 through 1945, and it was just a great story, and it is a great story. So that's one we wrote, and then we have one actually opening. It was supposed to open last year. Pure Country, which is based on the Warner Brothers movie Pure Country, is going to open now in April of 23 at the Tuts Theater Under the Stars in Houston, Texas, which is a very big, prominent performing arts center.
Well, that's great. And we talk about television. That's where you and I first worked together. You have written the music for Spencer for Hire, Murphy Brown, Singing Bee, Just the Ten of Us, Growing Pains, Murder, She Wrote, Columbo, Reba, and your films include Bronco Billy, Rocky IV, Pure Country, Tin Cup, and Honky Tonk Man. I mean, amazing. You must be exhausted.
You're exhausted just reading it.
I'm exhausted just reading it, and I didn't even read half of them. How often, you mentioned working with John Bettis. You worked with John Bettis on Growing Pains, didn't you?
Yeah, John and I knew each other from the record business, writing songs, and John's a incredible lyricist, and John and I were writing and having success writing songs for artists. And one day my agent called and said, hey, there's this half-hour pilot they'd like to talk to you about writing a theme song for. And it was Growing Pains. And John and I wrote As Long as We Got Each Other. And Growing Pains went on to being the biggest hit on ABC for 8 years. And so out of that, I started getting calls. I got a call to do, I think it was Major Dad over at Universal, and then just the 10 of Us, which was the spinoff of Growing Pains. And then I met Diane English on a show called My Sister Sam, and John and I wrote the theme for that. And then when Diane created Murphy Brown, I got the call to come in and do that one. And of course, that one ran for 10 seasons, I think.
And 30 years later, when I got the call from Diane, I immediately called Steve and I said, "You want to do the music? Because you're the guy we want."
Yeah.
Right.
And we did it again.
No, that was really fun. It was really fun getting to do that again. It was kind of a victory lap, for all of us, I think.
Yep.
Well, you talk about musical muscles when you're flexing from genre to genre. And you're like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of music. There ain't too much you haven't tackled. It's incredible to me, reading all your credits and the things you've done.
So, Steve, what comes first, the song or the artist? Does the artist hear your song and then decide they want to do it? Or does he come to you and say, Steve, I want to, does Tom Jones, for example, come to you and say, I want a song for my next album?
About 95% of the time, I just write a song and pray that someone, wants to do it. That other 5% of the time, I have been asked for specific artists to write something for. It's it can happen every way, but most of the time, I have a song, and if I hear that an artist is looking, I'll see if I can possibly get it to them, and hopefully they hear it and want to record it.
And how do you possibly get it to them? Through an agent or through a submission process, or what's the process?
Yeah, I'll either know the artist, I'll know the producer, I'll know the manager. Just because I've been doing it this long, that we tend to, if we do it long enough, we end up knowing who's who and what's the best way to get to so and so, what's the best way to get to this one, and that's generally the way it works.
And you've uprooted yourself from Burbank. Now you're living in Nashville?
Yeah, well, I was in Calabasas my whole career in Los Angeles, and 2 years ago I decided to make the move here. I was coming here 6 to 7 times a year to work, and with the advent of the downloading and being able to do what I do anywhere, I just felt like the time was... I had been looking at property here and got real lucky, found a great place, and just waited for my daughters to get out of high school, and then made the move.
I've often been told, and I've experienced it a couple of times. One of the times was on Babe Ruth, but the biggest quantum leap a movie can make is when you hear the music for the first time, when the music goes in, when you're on a dubbing stage. You conduct your own music. What does that feel like to hear your song come to life?
It's the best feeling. It's amazing. I mean, I still love getting in front of an orchestra and actually hearing what I had been hearing in my head. All of a sudden, they're playing it. And it's incredibly emotional. When it's put into the movie that I've been watching for weeks and months, maybe creating the soundtrack to, and all of a sudden it's there being played by an orchestra and real players, other than just me at the piano. It's just so uplifting and so emotional.
It's like a drug.
Yeah, I guess you chase an addictive dragon like that success. I mean, just hearing your stuff, for a person in the rock and roll band, hearing on the radio for the first time, but to see it in a film, well, and that's when the movie becomes a film. I think we wrote that in a segment on you in If These Lips Could Talk. It's the soundtrack that when the movie finally becomes a film, it means so much.
Yeah.
Some films, like iconic films like Jaws and Gone with the Wind and The Godfather, the soundtrack is as much a part of the film as the movie is, without a doubt.
Sometimes more.
Sometimes more, yeah. There's no question there. I did see when I was doing research on you that melodies are in your head since you were a kid. Like you were always playing with melodies. Did that come to fruition later on in your career when you became successful? Did some of those melodies stick with you?
Yeah, I think that's why I knew that writing for film was really where I was headed, because as a young kid, if I was in a snowball fight with four of my friends growing up in Queens, and you know what big snow drifts look like there. Yeah. My friends would all be hiding behind the snow drifts. I'd be in the middle getting pelted from every angle and musicalizing the whole thing in my head. And I would ask my friends, hey, how'd you hear that? And they'd look at me like I was nuts. I just assumed everybody did that.
Wow.
But I had this little mini orchestra in my head since I can remember, and everything I did, and I would underscore my life. And so the obvious place for me to go musically was to look at film, look at whether it was a helicopter chase or a love scene or a brutal robbery. I was musicalizing that. And so that came very natural to me. That was as natural as breathing to me.
What do you feel was your biggest commercial hit?
Song-wise?
Yeah.
Probably through the years, Kenny Rogers.
Yeah. That's what I was wondering.
It's become a standard, and I can't tell you how many emails I get every day. We got married to the song. I danced with my dad. The first, wedding, the father and the bride. We played it at my mother's funeral. Wow. It's just become that kind of a memorial, anniversary type song that everybody related to.
Well, I've always wondered how somebody. You were probably 31, 32 when you wrote that song. How somebody?
Well, I was actually 5, Frank.
Oh, wow!
So how a person could write that song at your tender young age? And I realized you were writing songs, 15 years before that. Can that be how you got so much experience in writing that song?
Yeah, I think, the songs I started writing when I was a teenager, I still remember some of them. They're just god-awful because I was learning the craft. I was learning more what not to do than what to do, both musically and lyrically. And like anything, you just get better and better, and hopefully you get better. And you learn shortcuts, and you learn what not to trip over. And so by the time, it's funny because when people say, how long did it take you to write through the years? I usually say, well, about 30 years. It took me to write that song. It took the lifetime of experience that I had experienced to be able to write that song.
How do you think, or can you tell me how the music industry has changed in the last 20 years?
Well, it's changed a lot in terms of the mechanics of sales. People aren't buying physical albums anymore. They're not buying physical product. They're streaming it. The internet has changed everything. And with television, with film, I don't have to tell you how it's changed the film business, and it's the same with music. Also, with the advent of electronics and computers and samples and all the things that the new tools that we have to create these sounds and records and film scores, without having to hire an 80-piece orchestra.
Do you still write the tried and true methods, successful as you've been, or do you try to adapt to all these new methods?
I've adapted, I think, in terms of production, the getting the finished product, but my process of songwriting is still the same. I still sit at my Yamaha piano and just crank it out.
Who do you admire the most? Which songwriter, say, influenced you the most, or did you admire the most? That you think, any particular body jump to your mind, or just a student of the whole game?
Yeah, so many. I think my idol that influenced me the most, it was Burt Bacharach.
Wow.
Good role model.
Yeah, not bad at all.
Bert's 90, I believe he just turned 93, and he's still doing it, So.
Well, just looking at the wide range of people that you worked at, of course, they're all household names. There's so many just icons. Who'd you find the most interesting to work with? Do you work directly with these people, or do you send them a song and do you back and forth it once they decide to take the song?
Yeah, a lot of different ways. Most of the artists that have recorded my songs, I've met, or I know, or I have worked with on the projects. They all individually bring so much of their talent and their speciality to every song. I mean, they're all so different. Certainly, Barbra Streisand there's only one of her.
Yeah.
And Anne Murray comes to mind as being one of the great voices. Celine, obviously. I never got to work personally with Whitney, but she recorded one of my songs, and I got to meet her briefly at an awards show. It's just different with all of them, but they're all there's a reason why they're who they are.
I got a question. Steve, I got a question. So when you're writing a song, and let's say the theme of the song is it's a love song, a love story, do you go through the process like an actor does, where you sort of put yourself in the mood of or the feeling of the song before you put lyrics down? Like, what's the process like for you? How do you get yourself to bring that sentiment out in the song itself?
That's an interesting question. I think again, it depends on the collaboration. If someone's given me a lyric to write to, so like Through the Years was totally lyric first. I was handed the lyric. As I'm reading the lyric, I somehow magically start to feel or hear what it's supposed to sound like. I know that's hard to imagine. And then by the time I get to the piano to kind of suss out what I'm feeling or hearing, I just start playing it. And, and then I'll tweak it. There may be a chord I go to that I'll go, I can do and gradually as the song comes together, and is about 85% done in my mind musically, then I'll start to fine tune it, maybe change a chord here or there, maybe alter the melody, maybe change a line of the lyric to make it a little, to me, it's a process. It's kind of like building anything, building a house, writing a script.
So is it fair to say that your subconscious, like the writing comes from your heart, and then the tweaking later on comes from your mind?
No question. No, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I feel the song. If it's a sad song, I just instinctively know where to go with it. If it's, I'm writing.
You trust your subconscious to bring you the good stuff, the stuff that's heartfelt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, you obviously been very successful. What do you take more pride in, your success or the success of your son?
That's a great question.
And your son is Steve Dorff, obviously.
Yeah, Steven's an actor.
Successful actor.
My other son, Andrew, was an extremely talented songwriter who was on fire. Unfortunately, he met in very untimely passing.
Very sorry.
We lost Andrew 4.5 years ago, and but yeah, I don't think of it that way. Obviously, I'm extremely proud of Stephen's work, of Andrew's work. I have a daughter, Caitlin, who's now singing and starting to write songs, and it's just great. I love watching that process. Of course, Stephen is hugely successful and working nonstop. But I love his work, and I try to be as objective as possible. I sometimes look for something constructive that I can say to him about something, but it's hard to, it just does really good work.
Well,
but I'm very, to answer your question, Frank, obviously I'm extremely proud of my kids and whether they were successful or not, as long as they're good people, but they are all in the entertainment world, and so that's kind of fun.
Well, let me ask you: do you think that made it easier for them, your success? I know it didn't make it easier for them to succeed, because success in this business is incredibly hard, but baseball players or athletes have a proportionate number of sons or daughters grow up to be athletes. Do you think you're being a role model for them made it easier for them to see how to succeed? Not any easier to succeed, but it made it easier to see, hey, my dad did it, I think I can do it too.
Yeah, I think so, because they of course, they have to have the talent and the ability.
Of course.
Right.
And I would be the first one to tell them, you know what, do something else. But I think being raised in it, being exposed to what they were exposed to growing up, yes, certainly helps, even subconsciously, to see how I did it. And hopefully they picked up some of that. And hopefully it worked for them.
So let me ask you this: the first time you walked in to see Clint's office, you had no experience with working with an actor or a person who had that high a profile.
Nowhere close.
Yes, and your kids had the ability to watch how you learned to work with all those people, and they weren't quite as intimidated as you would have been the first time you walked in to Clint. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's fair to say. It's funny when you mentioned that. It just triggered a memory that I hadn't thought about. I remember calling my wife Nancy at the time and saying, "I'll be home in 15 minutes. Clint Eastwood is coming over because I need to play him something." and she screamed and hung up the phone and then called me back and said, you can't. I'm leaving. I said, no, I just have to. I have to show him this thing, and I don't have it with me. And sure enough, Clint came over. I was living in North Hollywood at the time in a very modest little house, and Clint came in, and I remember a couple of years later, I had Michael Landon come over because I was scoring a movie. He was doing a pilot, and the same thing. My kid, Stephen was a little kid. He didn't know who Michael Landon was or Clint Eastwood, and so they were just being kids, but they were exposed to stuff like that, and yeah, I think it probably helped.
Well, it might opened up some doors, but we have a saying occasionally on the show: "With alligators raise alligators." You have to have the talent, and obviously your kids have the talent too. And I'm very, very sorry to hear about your son, Andrew. That's every parent's nightmare, of course. I mean, as a parent myself, and I mean, I just can't imagine the pain. But it must have been so gratifying for you to see your son induct you into the Hall of Fame. And I saw the speech that you made and his speech as well. And both of them were so emotional and so real. So
thank you.
Really, it was a wonderful thing to see as a parent.
Is there anything else, Derek? Do you have any other questions for Steve Dorff? Billy, do you have any closing comments?
I got a quick one. Just growing up as a kid in Queens, and you're talking about playing in the snow mounds and everything else, and I got to feel that had to help you enormously when you're meeting all these different people along the way, because it's such a melting pot, New York. Growing up in the streets of the Bronx, I know exactly. Like, I grew up with every kind of ethnic person you can meet, and I think it gives you a talent later on to get along with people. I think it does, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember Pete Langoni and Jeff Peneghetti wanting to beat me every day. I'll never forget those names. No, I'll never forget those names. How can you? One of them liked the girl I was dating, and I was 15 or 14, and he wanted to beat me up to show my girlfriend that he was tougher than me. But yeah, I grew up with a real melting pot of friends, and from all colors, all religions, and yeah, it's just when you grow up in New York, it's definitely a unique experience.
Yeah, it's funny. You remind me of a story that Perry Rogers told. Perry Rogers was a high school best friend of Andre Agassi, and he played on a tennis team. Andre was beyond him, of course, but they sort of they were 15-year-olds, and they sort of liked the same girl. So the girl came out to the tennis courts one day, and Andre said, "I'll play you left-handed." So he played Perry left-handed. Perry didn't get a point off him. So
beat his brains out left-handed.
Beat his brains out left-handed just to show up for the girl.
But it's funny that you talk about the kids you grew up with, and you still remember their names, and I'm sure they still remember yours, whether you were successful or not. Because, I mean, if you were Stinky, if your nickname was Stinky, you could be the CEO of IBM. You're always going to be Stinky. That's it. That's who you are. That doesn't matter how much money you make, how successful you are. That's the New York thing, I think.
Well, the great thing I've come to realize as I'm now in my 70s is that I can do the same work that I was doing in my 30s and 20s and do it just as well as as before. And the same goes for you. You've got a lot more hit songs in you, and I'll look forward to hearing them and seeing your work and listening to your work, because it's been a treat for all these years.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. And it's always been fun getting to work with you on stuff. And by the way, I got to mention this to you. I was in Los Angeles last week just for 3 days, and I'm sitting at Coffee Bean having coffee, and this guy comes over to me and he says, "Steve," and I look up and I'm going, "Oh my God, I know this guy. It was Joey Scott.
Oh yeah.
Remember Joey?
He was associate producer on Growing Pains. And now he's been a producer at Disney for some years now.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good
Yeah,
guy.
and I told him, because he was asking me, do you ever see any of the old, I said, yeah, Frank Pace and I worked on Murphy Brown again. I talked to Frank. He said, please say hi to him.
And Steve Papazian said to me, please say hi to Stephen Dorff.
Oh, cool. Well, that's cool. Well, thank you guys for having me. This has really been fun.
Great. I'm glad you liked it.
Terrific guest, man.
Glad you liked it.
Real pleasure to meet you. Really a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
An honor.
Be well.
Okay. Take care, you guys.
Take care, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Pretty good guy, huh?
Terrific guy. I love the New York touch too. When we talked about that, But imagine being 5 years old and there's a snowball fight going on and you're conducting the orchestra in your head. I mean, that's not like
normal.
Yeah, that's unique. I mean,
unique.
You know that this is where this guy's going. I mean, that's like. I mean, I've never heard of anything like that. Can you imagine?
But I know a lot of songwriters hear songs in their heads, and they've been hearing songs for all times. Same thing with writers. Same thing with all artists. Sort of.
But at such a young age. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Well, look at the Beatles. The Beatles were 16, 17, 18 when they were writing their first songs.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. She Loves You, yeah. Was not exactly,
but
not the White Album, but they evolved to the White Album within 10 years, and they were still writing the White Album when they were 26, 27 years old.
But I wanted to talk to
Dylan was writing songs about, who knows?
Blowing in the Wind. I mean, every black person in the 60s said, how could a white man write that song?
A white man 21 years old, 22 years old.
Didn't experience any of the pain how could he write it?
Because I believe he lived prior in another life.
Maybe you're right, Frank. Maybe there's something to it. I wanted to ask Steve about Ringo. I really was curious about that, working with Ringo Starr, what was it like, and I didn't get a chance. But when you just talked about Lennon and McCartney, one of the coolest things I ever heard McCartney say was, look, I was just writing songs with a friend of mine. I didn't know he was John Lennon.
Yeah, and he didn't know he was writing with Paul McCartney.
Yeah, I mean, who knew? Look, I work with Frank Pace, and he's working with Billy O'Connor.
And they're both working with Derek Harris.
Working with Derek Harris. Who the hell knew?
Good night, everybody.
No, good night. This has got to go on for a little bit.
But so I mean, it's just a fascinating guy, and it's so accomplished. And I'm kind of interested he said Burt Bacharach, but why not? I mean, piano player, lyricist.
Yeah, he could have just as easily
said Paul McCartney. He could have,
or just as easily said Frank Sinatra.
Yeah,
because Sinatra's out of the same era as Burt Bacharach. So I really like the fact that I really like that answer, Burt Bacharach, because it comes from a more musical time in our experiences.
Yeah, I don't. I wish I was more rounded in music. I mean, I unfortunately, I remember putting up a Facebook post once, and I said, I'm on a real Dylan kick lately. I'm on a Bob Dylan kick.
Right. For
the last 30 days, and somebody put underneath, I've been on a Bob Dylan kick for 60 years. I have a tendency to latch on to say the Beatles or the Dylan or stuff that I like and rehash it and rehash it and rehash it. Where Derek is always listening to new stuff. And
well,
you as well.
I like Little Nas myself.
Yeah, you always listen to we know he's a Little Nas guy, yeah?
I do like Little Nas.
Yeah.
A real Bronco Billy.
Well, you guys are more well-rounded.
Did you
than
like his
I am.
last video?
Yeah, I did.
Whoa.
Little Nas. Oh. And Derek tells me he likes Irish music, and then he tells me about Sinead O'Connor. It's like listening to a dinosaur. Come on, Sinead O'Connor.
Come on.
My man. But he listens to everything, and so do you. I think, you ever listen to a song and it flashes you immediately back to a time in your life? Like, like if I hear All You Need Is Love, the Beatles song, I think of Belgium and my brother drinking in a bar in Belgium. Like it flashes me to places, like certain memories, certain songs drive you to a happy memory in your life.
Yeah.
Does that happen to you?
Yeah, My Life by the Beatles. I know exactly where I was in 1973 the first time I heard that song.
Yeah, right. And it's a fond memory, so you tend to play it more, because it's not just the music and the song; it's what it does to you.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, the Beatles had a song come out called "When I Was 64." When I'm 64, and I was like 18 then. And what I used to do was, anytime I sort of liked a girl, I would sort of write a phrase from that and send it to the girl. Never worked out, but but I was always thinking, when I'm 64, I'm going to be so freaking old. Now, I wish I was 64 again.
Will you still need me? Will you
still feed me when I'm 64?
Yeah. It was a great movie. And this is an old movie, and I'm really going to date myself because I'm sure none of our audience even heard of Dirk Bogarde. But years ago, he made a movie called Sebastian. And what was about, a quick synopsis, he was a code breaker for the British. And he was the top code breaker. So all the German codes would come in. They'd have hundreds and hundreds of people working on these codes. Anything they couldn't break, they'd send to Sebastian, right? But his mind was a lot like Steve's in that he never thought about anything but code breaking.
Right.
So the only music he loved was music that reminded him of a code that he had broke. And even when he was making love, he was thinking about codes because he was, and I just think about music like that sometimes. I think the reason I get fixed on one particular artist or one particular song because of the memories it brings back.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of memories, Frank, and a lot of non-memories as well. A lot of brain cells dead, Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah, great guest though. Thank you for bringing him on. It was
I like to try to keep it diverse,
And yet every single guest that you brought on, no matter how successful they are, no matter how interesting they are, no matter what genre they're in, they all bring in that common factor. Luck. Yeah, luck.
Yep. You have to
catch the break.
You have to catch the break. An opportunity knocks, but you have to hear it to open the door.
Yeah.
You can't open the door if you don't hear it.
And you got to be ready to walk through it.
Yep. And you have to have done the work in advance. Like really quickly, I've got a friend who I was telling Derek about as an actor. I'll keep him nameless, but he's 35 years old, and he's been knocking his brains out for 12 years trying to get a break, going to auditions, doing student films, etc. Never could get a break. There's little Naz. There's little Naz. Yeah. Never could get a break. This year he's gotten a big part on a really big show, and he's got a recurring episode. He's got a recurring part on a big episode on a big series, and after 12 years, he's an overnight success.
That's the attitude.
Yeah.
Right? After 12 years, he's an overnight success.
Yeah.
Rodney Dangerfield, after 40 years in the business, he's an overnight success. Yeah,
it's like somebody said to me, "Why don't you write a book?" years ago, and I knew enough words. I just didn't know what order to put them in until I got older.
Yeah.
But I knew enough words.
Yeah. Well, that's the infinite amount of monkey sticks. Right?
Yeah.
Put them in front of an infinite amount of typewriters, and eventually you'll write all the greatest works of which I don't buy, but
But I hope you do buy If These Lips Could Talk,
or Combustible,
or Lamar's Gamble, because they're three pretty terrific books, and we don't get endorsements from Brooke Shields or Mary McNamara or Dwight Hicks or Armin Katayan just by accident. They have to be really, really representative books.
Listen, you opened the door, and the two of us seem to walk in, and let's hope that the fruits of our labor are, it's like the tree falling in the forest. I want people to hear the sound.
Yeah.
I want people to read them. Read the books. I think you'll like all three of them. And they're all different.
And Don Scardino gave us a terrific review also, and he's directing a new series on Stars, I think, called Murder in the Building, starring Steve Martin.
And that's on Stars now. That's out. Yeah.
So he's directing
Martin Short, right?
Martin Short.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I didn't know Scardino Don directed that. I'll check it out now.
He did a couple of episodes, that for sure. So I'm really happy for him. I'm proud of him. It's another 70-something doing great things. We're coming, younger generation. We're coming. We're coming for your jobs.
And if you didn't catch our Don Scardino interview, it's on our website, of course. But Don is the guy who directed A Few Good Men on Broadway.
Yep.
With Stephen Lang and the Jack Nicholson part. And,
yep. And he starred in Godspell.
Starred in Godspell
on Broadway.
And Aaron Sorkin gave Aaron Sorkin a big shot and a big boost ahead.
Yep.
And that's saying something. You're giving Aaron Sorkin a leg up.
Yep, for sure. Well, before we go, I want to say our sponsor, weekendcoffee.com. They manufacture great coffee beans, deliver them straight to your door. It's Weekend Coffee Company, and they deliver. Billy, why don't you tell us about?
Well, besides having a good brand of coffee, a delicious brand of coffee, after every 10 bags, they buy one back for either first responders and veterans, and they donate a bag to both. And that's a really sweet thing. It's no reason for them to do that, but I like to support people to support us.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So to you,
cheers.
We'll hoist a cup of Weekend Coffee Company.
We'll hoist a cup of kindness, friend.
A cup of kindness.
Derek, here's the little Nas. Was that the little Nas or was that Sinatra that you had up there? I couldn't tell. I looked quick and I couldn't.
I wonder. They blurred out his little Nas.
Well, that's all it took. They could have put my little Nas up there. All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next week.
We really appreciate it.
Next week's guest, in our salute to Vietnam veterans, Staff Sergeant, 25th Military, Dr. Tom Moynihan.
We'll see you next week.